can't even fight it. And none of the words out of my mouth without even trying. And I speechless. Standing there in emptiness. What it's doing to me ain't a secret.
Hey there, I figured I'd better check in with what I've been reading during this week. You've seen lots of clips of fun things we've been up to on our staycation, and so I figured I'd better show you that I have actually been doing some reading this week as well. So yesterday I finished this romance novel. This is A Duke of Her Own by Eloisa James, and this is like book 4 or something in the Desperate Duchesses series. I think that's the name of this particular series of books. Desperate Duchesses, yes. So I like Eloisa James. She writes really fun Regency romances, and in this one we're getting the story of the Duke of Villiers and Eleanor. And Eleanor has made a vow that she will only marry a duke, and there's a reason for that, which we find out. The fun thing about this book is that it's not a love triangle, it's a love square, basically. There's our main couple that we're following, and then another woman and another man that also are part of the story. There's a wide cast of funny characters. The duke in question has 5 or 6 bastard children that he's determined to raise himself and bring out into society. And there is a little dog that pees on the carpet all the time. So lots of amusing scenes occur. The heroine, Eloisa James, writes very modern heroines with, minds of their own and lots of will of their own to take control of their own destiny, which I really enjoy. And this was a fun, quick read, perfect for vacation, and loved it. And then this morning, I finished the first read that I've had for POC-a-thon, and that's Small Country by Gael, which was translated from the French by Sarah Ardizone. Sorry if I butchered that one. So this story, the author here, Gael, is mixed race. His dad was French and his mom was Rwandan, and he grew up in Burundi in Africa. And this story basically, it's fiction, but I would say that some of it is memoir, or some of the things that happen in this book probably happened to the author. And the main character that we're following, the story is being told from the point of view of Gabby, who is like 10 or 11 years old when during the time period that the story takes place, but adult Gabby is narrating it as he's looking back to his childhood growing up in Burundi. He lived a very privileged life as basically in this part of Burundi that foreigners or expats lived in, and his dad was a well-to-do businessman, so he lived in a safe place, and it sort of shows, the story documents Gabby's loss of innocence as war comes to both Rwanda and Burundi, and how that influences him and his family, and how he gradually loses his childhood to the violence that's happening all around him. This is a very difficult book. This is basically a novella. It's only like 183 pages, but it's the text is large and lots of white space, so it takes not very long to read it, but the content is really difficult. There is an extreme amount of violence on the page. the children in the story are exposed to horrific episodes as the Rwandan genocide starts to take place in 1993 and the civil war that subsequently happens in Burundi. So it's difficult, and if that's the sort of thing that you struggle with, I would not advise you to read this book. I can't say I enjoyed reading this. I thought that the writing was not to my taste. It felt very episodic. The narrative did not flow very well as a story, I didn't think, and I almost wish that Gael Faye had just simply written a memoir. I think the first part of this reads like a memoir, and then after certain historic events take place, we start to devolve, the countries start to devolve, and Gabby's childhood devolves as well. And then you're in sort of a totally different, more fast-paced narrative. So that was a little jarring as well. You may remember I tried to buddy read this. Sean and I tried to buddy read this back in like April or May of this year, and Sean bailed on it, and I sort of just put it aside thinking I'd get back to it. And I figured POC-a-thon was a good time to get back to the story and give it another try. And I am glad I read it because it gives me another perspective on the events that happened in Rwanda during the 1993 genocide. But I would not say this is a highly successful book for me, but I think that it did give me a bit more insight into those historical events and sort of what led up to them and what it would be like for just a normal child growing up in that kind of situation. So, you may be interested in those things, and this is, like I said, a short, quick read, so it can give you a little more insight. But as far as like superb writing or anything like that, this is not the book I would say for you. So then I do plan to start today, Ask Me About My Uterus, which I talked about on my last current and recent reads video. And I am reading through my back issues of the Atlantic Monthly magazine, and I will probably pick up another romance novel. But still a few days left. I'm about halfway through my vacation, so God only knows what I'll pick up in the meantime. But I will check in again before the end of this vlog. This book is excellent, and the author grew up in Maine. Who knew?
26?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
If you have it on draft, yeah.
Yep. Sure. Anybody else need anything?
No.
I need another piece of bread.
Sure.
Hi there. I figured I'd better wrap up this vlog, my staycation vlog, here. Our niece has headed off back to college for the semester, the fall semester, and we had a wonderful time just hanging around our camp and doing some fun things, which you will have seen in this vlog, and it was really great just to be staying at home and relaxing. It was a very relaxing week. So I did finish one more book in the week, and that is this nonfiction, Grandma Gatewood's Walk, The Inspiring Story of the Woman Who Saved the Appalachian Trail by Ben Montgomery. So this is the story of 67-year-old grandmother, great-grandmother actually, Emma Gatewood, who up and decided one day without telling anyone in her family that she was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. So she starts in Georgia. This is in 1955. So at this point, I think no women have through hiked the trail, and only like 4 or 5 men have. So it's 1955. The trail really is quite obscure at this point. Not too many people really think about it or know about it. And she had read an article about it in National Geographic magazine, and she decides to do it. And she takes off basically with the clothes she's wearing, in tennis shoes or sneakers as we call them in the Northeast, and a bag, a homemade sewn bag that she throws over her shoulder with basically enough food and water to get her through the day. And just starts out, she has no experience with, she has a little bit of experience with sort of day hikes and being in the woods, and of course she has lived on a farm her whole life, so she's a very capable person, but she's never done this sort of long-term wilderness hiking. And I found that really fascinating, and, you know, spoiler alert, she does make it through the entire 2,050-mile trail from Georgia to Maine. The trail ends, the terminus of the trail is Mount Katahdin, which is the highest point in Maine. And she makes it the whole way at 67 years old. So this book is really interesting if you're interested in things like nature writing and wilderness hiking and survival stories. I will say that Emma Gatewood's backstory, which we also learn about her marriage, her abusive marriage, and how poor she was growing up, especially the abusive marriage bit, is really hard to read about. And the writing itself is not stellar. I mean, this is basically a straightforward memoir type, although she doesn't write it herself, so it's not memoir. But this is really a straightforward telling of this story. So it's not, don't go in this expecting beautiful prose or anything like that. But it's a pretty interesting story, and if you liked A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, you might very well like this. This does not have the humor that Bryson's book had, but it does have the sort of absurdities of hiking such a long distance through wilderness. Emma Gatewood relies on the kindness of strangers. She just walks up to houses and asks if she can have a place to stay at nights or she sleeps out in the rough, in the leaves, in the bushes, whatever. So she's really an inspiring character. And also Ben Montgomery gives us a backstory of how the trail was formed and why in the certain time period the trail was formed in the 30s, the 1930s, and what was going on in the U.S. in the 1950s when Emma Gatewood does her walk. So the first bit of this, I read like the first probably 25 pages, and I was like, I don't know if I'm really going to like this. And then I sat down last night and said, I'm going to read to page 100 and see what I think, and I couldn't put it down. I read the whole thing straight through at that point. So I think that's a good indication of how well I liked it. And then I have been working steadily on a bunch of other books. I have picked up a new romance novel. I'm reading The Wicked and the Wallflower by Sarah MacLean. This is book number 1 in the Bare Knuckle Bastards series, so a new series by her, Regency Romance. I'm about 60% of the way through that, reading it on ebook. Very fun. I very much like Sarah MacLean's style of sort of feminist romance novels, I guess I would say. They are the new breed of romance novels for today's world. So enjoying that. And I'm also still reading Ask Me About My Uterus, A Quest to Make Doctors Believe in Women's Pain by Abby Norman. And I am about halfway through this memoir nonfiction book about Abby Norman's difficulties with endometriosis. And interesting thing, I think I mentioned earlier in the vlog, Abby Norman grew up in Maine, and so part of the first part of the story is really telling about her childhood, and so that was interesting to me to know that she was from Maine and to hear about her experiences. But also the thing that this is really excellent and very compelling reading, but I went into this thinking it was specifically going to be about endometriosis, and the whole first half of the book is really more about Norman's growing up in an abusive situation with her family. She actually applies for legal emancipation from her parents when she's 16 years old. So just putting that out there for people who might find that difficult to read about. It was not what I was expecting this book to be about, and I'm hoping the second half of this book really gets more into the endometriosis part although we have touched on a bit of the history of is sort of how medicine has dealt with women's issues, specifically related to period pain and hysteria and all that sort of thing. So that's interesting, but it hasn't been the focus so far, and so I'm hoping that the second half of this will be more focused on that aspect of her story. I have been reading my nonfiction Think Like a Freak by the authors of Freakonomics. This is Stephen Levitt and Stephen Dubner. You may know of their podcast and the earlier books, Freakonomics and Super Freakonomics. And I am a little over halfway in this book as well, and not enjoying it as much as I enjoyed Freakonomics and Super Freakonomics, because this is more about how they come to the conclusions they do when they're examining different issues. So still pretty interesting, though, and thought-provoking. And then I need to read today my next short story in this collection, because buddy reading this with Sean, and I'm due to check in with him either tonight or tomorrow morning, and so I want to make sure I get my short story read. And then I want to pick up Stephen King's The Outsider. So this is the latest book by Stephen King. It was published last year in 2018, and I have this, you guys know I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and I have this weird habit of buying his latest book and then sitting on it until I know his next book is going to be released. And just recently I read that he has a book coming out in October, I believe. His next book is coming out in October, and so I feel safe to read The Outsider now that I know that there will be another book by Stephen King coming my way. So I'm excited to delve into that one. So that's where I am with my week of reading. I hope you've enjoyed seeing some clips of where I live and what we got up to this past week, and I will talk to you later.